Technically True by Tanay Pant. Hello everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Technically True. My name is Tanay Pant and I'm your host. Today we are going to talk about a question that I've heard a lot of people ask. How do I start public speaking? Today I'm joined by my very good friend PJ Hagerty.
Hey everybody.
PJ is the founder of DevRel.io and a board member of open sourcing Mental Illness. He's also a developer, writer, speaker, musician, and a community advocate. And the word on the street is that he's also known for wearing hats. A very warm welcome, PJ.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been a developer for years, working in the tech space, everything from academic software to platform as a service to working with you at Crate for a while, actually. And a few years ago, I decided that I needed to expand out, so I created a company called DevRel, which is focused on small startups and people that might not be able to do developer relations by themselves. So I focus with working with groups like that. I started speaking kind of accidentally, actually. I was at a conference. There was, a quiet lunch between some friends, and a friend of mine said, you always come to these conferences, you always participate, but you never speak. And I was like, okay, well, that's true. I have like half an idea that maybe sometime I'll get around to it. We'll see how it goes. And he signed me up for a lightning talk. That lightning talk turned into a full talk at another conference after I gave it, which then turned into traveling to talk. And it was just kind of snowballed from there. So it's an interesting way kind of to get started.
That sounds really interesting. So before we move ahead, I have prepared some rapid fire questions so that we can get to know you a little better. PJ has not seen these questions beforehand. Shall we get started then?
Absolutely.
Okay, PJ, favorite conference?
Favorite conference, I would have to say probably MagmaConf in Colima, Mexico. It had a great family feel. It was very well organized, and you ended up, everyone stayed in villas with people they may or may not know, so you became fast friends. The entire conference was self-contained, so you're able to, watch some talks, then go swimming during lunch, grab some homemade food by the organizer, like authentic Mexican food, watch some more talks, go back to your villa to relax for a bit, then they'd make dinner for everyone, and you would, have fun into the night because everything was right there on the grounds. You never had to go anywhere or worry about getting directions or is there a lift or a bus to take me where we're going. Like everything had this whole family feel, like we're so glad you're here. We make you feel welcome. So MagmaConf is probably it's probably my number one conference.
Wow, sounds like a fun family camp, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next question. Favorite speaker?
Favorite speaker? Okay, that's a tough one. I would have to say, and this might be some of my Ruby community days bleeding back in, but probably Aaron Patterson. Aaron is a great person. He's really good at conveying technical information in a way that's easily digestible and funny. It's entertaining. And I like the fact that Aaron's kind of up for anything. He's in on the joke. He appreciates the joke. And so he's very, very good at conveying the message while still, being entertaining. So you want to see him.
Cool. Your tech inspiration?
My tech inspiration. That's a tough one. I would have to say I got into tech at a young age while I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Left for a while because I was a musician for a while and came back. But I think early on, like my tech inspiration was movies for the most part, things like Hackers and War Games and movies that made it seem like tech was a lot like, to be honest, it was a lot cooler than it looked. A lot of things that we do in tech is very mental. Like the whole idea of the landscape is really what's in your mind. So you can create a very interesting story there. But at the same time, when you look at someone who's in tech, mostly you walk around at a conference, it's people sitting with laptops typing. But that's kind of what got me into it was movies like War Games and Hackers very early on. I wanted to know how these things worked. So I started looking into how to piece these things together myself.
Awesome. Favorite city to speak in?
Ooh, Dublin, Ireland, I would have to say.
Why is that?
It's very inviting. People there want you, like they say when you speak, people want you to succeed, which is true. But in Dublin, there's this whole inviting atmosphere. The entire culture in Ireland is really dedicated to making people feel welcome, making people feel like they have friends there immediately. So when you speak there, it often feels that like the crowd just wants you to be happy and succeed. They want you to do everything right. They're thrilled that you're there. And it
Mhm.
just creates this warm and welcoming feeling as you take the stage.
Right. And the last one, topic that you're the most passionate about.
Topic that I am most passionate about, I would have to say mental health and tech. It's not a topic that unfortunately I get to speak on too often,
Mhm.
but I think it's one of the most important things facing people in technology today. A lot of people aren't aware, but we are close to the top of the list of people with mental health issues. Things like depression, anxiety, OCD,
Mhm.
eating disorders. There's so many different things that are going on in tech that people, because it's our brains, we're unwilling to talk about it.
Mhm.
So that's why if I have the opportunity to discuss it with anyone or talk about it or refer them to OSMI, which is open sourcing mental illness, like anything that I can do to kind of make people aware that this is an issue that we need to talk about that might spur someone to go and get help or talk to someone like a therapist is to me a huge benefit. So
Mhm.
that's what I am most passionate about talking about.
That sounds really cool. It would be great to talk to you on this podcast one day about open sourcing mental illness.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to bring a couple experts along too.
Super. Thanks for answering these questions, PJ. What I recently came across was these two school of thoughts. One which believes that you should focus on immersing yourself in upping your skills for many years and then getting to speaking at some point. And the other group kind of advocates to start speaking, sharing your experiences, and learning as you go. So, like, what are your thoughts on that? And when is the best time to start giving talks?
I think there's value in both schools of thought here. I think that a whether you're an industry expert that's been around for years or you're someone who's just learning or maybe just out of a boot camp,
Hmm.
you have a level of experience or a level of expertise that you might not know what it is unless you go and you talk about it, you start discussing it with other people. So I think giving talks, I mean, it doesn't always have to mean you're giving talks at Web Summit in front of 20,000 people.
Right.
It could just be you go to your local meetup and you're like, hey, I learned this cool thing and I would like to share it with you. Those talks are always important. At the same
Mhm.
time, if you've been doing this for years, you need to be up there talking. You have a store of knowledge in there that you need to be sharing with people. That's super, super important.
Right.
I think that, as far as like, programming, we're always constantly learning. It's
Mhm.
it's it's a never-ending cycle. It's not a thing where you're going to say, all right, well, I've been around, I've done agile, I've been part of a Scrum team, I've focused on open source software, I've written PHP and Perl and Ruby for years. I'm done. I'm totally done. No, there's things like DevOps out there and new languages that are emerging that are
Yeah.
taking over the scene, and things are going mobile more than ever. So it's like, it's not a stop point at any point in time. This is something that you need to constantly go into, and sharing your journey, speaking about it is really, really important.
The biggest challenge that people face is the fear of stage. And the second biggest challenge might be selecting the topic or theme that you want to start talking about. So, how do you choose that first topic?
So the first topic is it's somewhat of a tough one, but I'm going to say this, and some people don't agree, but this is my point of view. You
Hmm.
want to choose something you're passionate about, something you can get behind. My first ever topic was about meetups, which is something I was really into at the time.
Hmm.
I was in the process of writing a guide on how to run a meetup and talk about how like meetups are kind of like open source projects in that you want to have more than one person involved. You want to have a group that you can count on to make sure each of the pieces that is important to the meetup goes together. And I could get more into it, but that's not important. But at the time, I was like super passionate about meetups. I was like, meetups are the greatest thing that have ever happened. And I still
Yeah.
am. It's not what I talk about mostly, but I still am. And that's the key. If you are most passionate about how you have Git shortcuts that help you to push code faster, do a
Hmm.
talk on it. People would love to hear it. And that's just one example, but find something that you're really into and write a 5-minute lightning talk. Find a place where you could do it, like your local meetup or something like that. People want to hear. And you'll find that when you're passionate, it's very easy to get over the whole stage fright thing.
Yeah.
I get mildly nervous when I get on stage. Generally, my attitude towards speaking is always like, I want it to be done. Once the day comes and I'm like within an
Yeah.
hour, I'm like, all right, let's get started. I'm ready to talk. I don't have a stage fright so much as I want to be up there. I
Yeah.
want it to happen. But yeah, I know a lot of people who are nervous speakers, people who are professionals.
Mhm.
Actually, you asked me who one of my favorite speakers was, and Aaron Patterson, who's been doing this for years, talks about how he is terrified to get up on stage still.
Yeah.
And like, I always found that interesting. And I think part of it is people are worried they're going to misspeak or say something wrong,
Mhm.
especially if they're passionate about something and they feel like maybe they were single focused on it. But in reality, if you really go over it, you practice, you make sure that you have the right information, that you don't have to worry.
Yeah.
As long as you're up there providing information that you care about, the message will come over clearly and it won't be a problem.
Yeah. So I also sometimes feel like that morning is the best time to give a talk for me personally, because then I'm not in a sort of anxiety for the whole day. Yeah, I feel that morning is probably the best time for me in this case. Like, what would you recommend for first time speakers? Like, is there a certain time slot which is probably better for them to get involved in?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it kind of depends on the event.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about a conference, it's say like at least a 2-day conference, you want to have a day in the afternoon where you are either just after lunch or just after lunch.
Hmm.
And the reason why is if you're in the morning, you are after the keynote, who's probably a big name who's been doing this for a while,
Right.
and you don't really want to follow them up because you're going to be it's going to boggle your mind how you're going to do it. You don't want to be too close to lunch. You don't want to be before lunch. No one ever wants to be before lunch.
Everybody's hungry.
Yeah, there's the slot before lunch. Everybody's like salivating and worried that they want food. They want to get in there.
Yeah.
And you're the one standing in their way. You're the one person that's blocking them from eating lunch. So after lunch,
Yeah.
people are satisfied. They're more relaxed. And after lunch, like they're a little more awake and attuned. They've had their little break. They've kind of had their sleepy time after lunch to take a lighter talk maybe. And then you get in that slot and you really deliver. I think that's the key. I'm also big on, for first time speakers, having them on the second day.
Yeah.
The main reason for that is they can see what the other speakers are doing, maybe catch some tips. Most communities that I've been in where there's new speakers are very supportive of new speakers. And
Hmm.
so it's easy to say, like, okay, we're going to put you, after lunch, day 2, everybody's still going to be around. You're going to have a good time and just relax. Introduce the new speaker to all the other speakers at a speaker dinner or something like that. And they'll be able to kind of interact and pick up tips and tricks so they know how to handle things once they get on stage. And I'm a huge fan of what they call the tech check. You go in, you make sure your dongle attachments are
Oh,
working
right.
for HDMI. You make sure the microphone's working. You get familiar with the room. You don't have to run your slide deck, but like hit play on Keynote or PowerPoint, whatever you're using to present.
Yeah.
Um, if you are a first-time speaker, the other thing I recommend is don't do anything that's going to require internet. The much vaunted and always talked about demigods are never with you. They do not want you to succeed. If you're going to do something that involves writing code, do a screen cap of it beforehand. If you're going to do anything that involves needing a resource, do a screen cap of it beforehand. This is not only does it give you the opportunity to make a funny joke where it looks like you're coding and you could walk away from your computer, and everyone's like, oh, we were tricked again. People love that joke for some reason.
That's a
But
good one.
additionally, it gives you the opportunity to say, all right, I don't need to focus on that part of my talk.
Yeah.
I just need to focus on the slides and the other things I need to do.
Hmm. I think that's a great segue into what I was going to ask you next is like, what is the most effective way of preparing? You can make sure that the content is engaging enough for the audience, because nobody wants a sleepy audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can you engage them in the best possible way?
I don't know if it's the best possible way. I just know it's the way that it's worked for me. I had a life before tech as a musician for a while. And one of the bands I was in, we always had an agreement that every show we played, we were playing Glastonbury or we were playing Wembley Stadium. Like we were playing, didn't matter if it was 4 people in a
Hmm.
shite bar in Buffalo. Like we
Hmm.
were going to play it like this was the biggest rock show in the history of mankind. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the way that I approach my talks as well.
Hmm.
Is that, I'm going to walk into this room, and if it's a meetup with 20 people or a stage with 3,000 people, makes no difference to me. I'm going to be super energetic. I'm going to get people pumped up. I'm going to get them interacting very quickly with
Hmm.
questions like, hey, how's everybody doing? And I demand that they give me a response. And yet some of it's cheesy and, it can come off, there's people that are going to be like, groan and roll their eyes. But you know what? I need to make sure you're involved. Another great way to do that is to add questions into your talk. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was doing a talk a couple weeks ago about DevOps, and I was like, how many people have used continuous integration? How many people are familiar with continuous deployment, continuous delivery? How many people, just every once in a while ask those questions. How many people have heard of the Pony Express? Like
Mhm.
weird questions like that tie into your talk. And that's the other way to do it too, is most of my talks have an angle of some sort. I will be speaking in a few weeks at DevOps Days Edinburgh in Scotland.
Mhm.
And the talk that I'm doing is called Turing from Turing to the World of Analytics. It's about the story of Alan Turing, but how does that affect the world of big data and analytics and logging and monitoring, the way that we look at things today?
Mhm.
And I mean, the main focus is on DevOps and logging and monitoring, but through the story of Alan Turing and the work that he did in World War II. So a little bit of a history lesson, a lot of bit of technical information. And I
Mhm.
think that's the key. You have to have something interesting. If you just say, we are going to talk about logging and monitoring,
Yeah.
like no one's going to go to your talk. People will fall asleep. You have to kind of jazz up. This is like, we're educating people on things when we go out and do talks, but at the same time, we have to have a bit of entertainment in there. I'm
Yeah.
not saying come out and start doing magic tricks or, have some kind of gimmick where you're going to be on a unicycle every single time you talk. That's
Yeah.
not important, but you have to inform and entertain a little bit while you're educating, or you lose a little bit of the value.
Yeah. What are the biggest hurdles that you personally faced when you got started with public speaking on a professional scale?
Yeah, I mean, personally, some of the hurdles were at the time my kids were a lot younger than they are now, so traveling to speak was difficult.
Mhm.
The other thing is the constant rejection.
Yeah.
When you're a new speaker, I don't think you understand what goes into applying to speak somewhere, waiting for the information to come back, whether you got accepted, applying to more CFPs. You're not sure what you're doing right or wrong, and you get a lot of rejections. I mean, my rejection rate when I first started was probably like 90%. Now, granted, I was only applying to like 10 conferences a year and, speaking at a couple, but nonetheless, like 80 to 90% is about where that rejection rate was. And it wasn't until another speaker reached out to me and he was like, that's totally normal.
Mhm.
That is exactly how it should be. That's how it is for everybody. It's not just you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, that's a relief. I thought that I was actually terrible at this job. But I mean, even now where I've been doing this for 7, almost 8 years,
Mhm.
speaking and traveling, and now I've switched from applying to being invited more often than filling out a CFP, and that's great. But when I fill out CFPs, it's still like a 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
Like I have a name and I have some great topics to talk about. I have a lot of knowledge to share.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, about 50% of the time, people are just going to say, no, it doesn't really fit in with what we're doing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's no way for you as a speaker filling out the form to know what everyone's looking for. It's
Mhm.
impossible.
Right.
So take it with a grain of salt. If you get rejected, it's probably not you. I know from running events, I've rejected talks that were like 0.0001 points away from being accepted.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's just the way it goes. Time is a real thing. Organizers have to manage that. If I could accept every talk that was ever submitted, I probably would,
Mhm.
with a few exceptions, of course. But unfortunately, like I can't always run a 10-track conference, in the middle of February in Buffalo. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. On the subject of CFPs, so one of the things I've heard a lot of difficulty that newcomers face is conferences sometimes ask for sort of references or previous videos. So probably one way to circumvent that would be to record yourselves giving a talk at a meetup or maybe on your computer and put it on YouTube. Would you give an advice on that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the advice right there. Go to a meetup and say, listen, I've got this talk. I need to record it for something I'm applying to. Is it cool if I know that we have a plan for this month, but is it cool if I do a 5-minute talk and we record it? I think most meetup organizers would be like, that's fine. No one's going to hold it against you. You can record yourself, but I feel like that doesn't come off the way it would come off if you're in front of people. And that's really what these organizers want to know.
Yeah.
When you give the talk, what will it be like? They don't want to, anyone can sit there and to be honest, you can edit yourself speaking left and right if you record yourself on like QuickTime
Yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever. That's, I mean, in a way, to me, that's kind of like cheating. Get up and do it in front of people. Even if you have to, like, chances are you work somewhere, you work with people, gather a bunch of people and say, hey, I have to give this talk for 5 minutes. Can 10 of you come in the conference room and listen to me talk for 5 minutes and one of you record it?
Hmm.
And I'll put it up on YouTube so I can apply to this conference.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good way to get things started. While we were on the subject of the hurdles that new speakers face, what are some of the reasons that a lot of people kind of drop out of this business or sort of give up after a period of time? Is there
Sure.
any advice you'd like to give to avoid these kind of roadblocks?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I think there's a few different reasons why people stop doing what we do. And part of that, one of the biggest things I think is you burn out. It takes
Mhm.
a certain mentality to be able to be the face of a company, which is kind of what DevRel is. You're the face
Yeah.
of a company. When I go somewhere and I see you, I know that you're representing Crate. You're the face of Crate.
Mhm.
And that's awesome. But that also means that, like, a lot of times you have to be up and at the conference first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
You have to do your talk. You then have to hang out after your talk. That's definitely, quick pointer for any new folks. Even no matter how tired you are and how crazy that was and how your anxiety is and you're ready to crash, you have to give 5 to 10 minutes after your talk for people to see you and hang out. After that, you can totally go crash for a little bit and be in a silent place. That's totally okay. But expect that people are going to want to talk to you. So you do your talk, and then, probably you're going to go to a dinner or some sort of party or some sort of event in the evening. You're going to have to keep that going. And it doesn't, to be clear, I just want to clear this up. That doesn't mean you have to be drinking and partying all the time. That's not a requirement of the job. If
Yeah.
you're into that, great. If you're not, that's fine too. Talking to people, though, is part of your job. Networking is a major part of developer relations. You have to keep that going. And sometimes you have to keep that going for several hours a night. So you got up early in the morning. You did a talk somewhere during the day. You're now up at night hanging out, talking to people. It's exhausting. I can totally understand why people burn out. One of my biggest piece of advice for that are learn your limits. Do not push beyond them. I know how long I can go without, sleeping or eating or any of that stuff. And
Yeah.
I will dead drop a conversation. Just be like, listen, this is great. And I would love to talk about this more. You have my information, get in touch, but I have got to go get like a hamburger or something real quick, or I'm going to just be dead on my feet.
Yeah.
And people are human beings. 9 times out of 10, they completely understand.
Yeah.
There will always be that one person who doesn't. But because of that, add to that the travel, the amount of time spent in airports and hotels, the time spent away from home. If you have a family or a relationship, it can be tough for that. So I think that's why a lot of people don't last very long. That, to be perfectly honest, I think a lot of people don't have that many interesting topics that they can constantly be changing and talking about. I know a few speakers who lasted about 18 months to 2 years. They felt that they were happy with what they had conveyed. They had sent out the message that they wanted to send on the topics they want to talk about. And they're like, cool, I'm done. I'm going to go back. And if in a couple years I feel like there's something else I want to talk about, I'll come back. And that's fine. And that's kind of how it works. Some people are more versatile and have a new talk every month. That's fine too. But it's about finding what works for you. And if you find that this isn't the job for you, or that it's too much stress, or that it's too exhausting,
Mhm.
walk away. It's totally okay to, at the same time, like, I realize I would not make a good long distance bus driver. It's not something
Yeah.
that I think would be a good job for me because I get tired.
Mhm.
Whatever. I'd find another job, and that's totally okay. And you can do it. Chances are, if you're in DevRel, you're at a certain level in your career
Mhm.
and you have the skills to find something else.
And what would you say, like for people starting public speaking, maybe how many talks per quarter or per year would be an ideal number to avoid burning out?
So you're just starting at public speaking. I would say maybe once per quarter,
Hmm.
and I would ramp it up. Like, maybe the first time is like a company meeting or something like that. If you
Yeah.
have in services or your company does that, do
Hmm.
that the first quarter, get some feedback, massage it a little bit. In the
Hmm.
second quarter, go to a meetup that you're familiar with. The people, you go to this meetup regularly, do the talk there. Third quarter, go to a meetup that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Go to a place that they might not know you, because when people know you, they kind of give you oh, that was a great talk, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah.
Whereas, meetups are great for giving real feedback because people can personally talk to you, which is
Yeah.
awesome. On the other hand, like, getting out of your comfort zone is going to really kind of push you. So when the fourth quarter comes and you're speaking at a conference, great. Now you've got some road tested ideas. Your slides are in a way that you want them. Hopefully things are working out technically. I mean, to be honest, the technical part of things is always a question. I've been speaking for many years, and I had a slide presentation I did recently where for some reason every slide was duplicated, even though when I took it down on my computer in Keynote, that was not an issue. They were not duplicated, but when during display, they were. So it happens to everybody. Doesn't matter how much of a so-called expert you are, and expert is kind of a loaded term. But yeah, so that's my suggestion. Do it locally at the company, Q1, a familiar meetup, Q2, unfamiliar meetup, Q3, actual conference, probably a small one, Q4.
That's an excellent tip, PJ. All right. I wonder if we are missing something, anything else that you'd like to convey to the universe before we wrap things up?
I think one of the biggest things that I think is important when you become a public speaker in tech, when you're going out there and you're on the road, after you've kind of reached that 1 year and you're saying, all right, I'm going to do developer relations. I'm going to be a community advocate. This is what I'm going to do now. I think one of the most important things to remember is humility. You are up on that stage and that's great. However, the most important people in that room are the ones who are watching you.
Yeah.
They put you there. You're there to serve them. You are working for those people. They don't literally pay your salary, but those are the people that you're trying to impress. You're trying to inform, you're trying to educate. Be humble. I've seen people that have come about and thought that they were the greatest thing since sliced bread, which I don't know why that's always our benchmark, but that's always our benchmark.
Right.
And that's great. But you know what? If you lack humility, I really don't want to listen to you. And this is true, wherever you are. And I know that everyone has their moments. And I know that sometimes I come off with a lot of bravado. And that's kind of part of the PJ show. That's part of the PJ facade.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just be kind to people. Be kind and be humble, and you will find that you'll have a very, very well-rounded speaking career. You will find that you will rise up the ranks pretty quickly. People will want you around. And that's the key. That's the goal, right? If you want to do public speaking, if you want to do DevRel, you want more and more people to want you to be around so that you can do more and more of this. Exactly. And in order to do that, stay humble, be kind, always have time for the people who listen to you, and be cool like Fonzie. That's basically it.
Words to live by. Well, thank you very much for joining us as our first guest today, PJ. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening to the first episode of Technically True. I'm at @Tane1337 on Twitter, and I would love to know what you'd like to listen in the next episode. Until then, peace out. You have been listening to Technically True, a podcast about public speaking, developer relations, and technology, hosted and produced by Tane Pan.